summer of 2014 saw a wave of protracted protests of police shootings, most notably to the non-response associated with the killing of 18-year-old Michael Brown. Beyond the shootings themselves, however, many took issue with the degree to which police themselves seem to have militarized, taking to the streets wearing camouflage, bulletproof vests, gas masks, and arriving in armored personnel carriers and brandishing shotguns and military-style assault rifles. This led many to wonder where police had acquired such equipment, and a New York Times piece in June of 2014 seemed to provide the answer. The Department of Defense's 1033 program, wherein the DoD would provide surplus military equipment to law enforcement agencies free of charge. In August of that year, the New York Times released an accounting of just how much of that gear had been released to local law enforcement. Between 2006 and April of 2014, agencies throughout the country received over $1.5 billion worth of equipment, including over 600 mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles, 79,288 assault rifles, 205 grenade launchers, 11,959 bayonets, 50 airplanes, 422 helicopters, and $3.6 million worth of, quote, deception equipment and camouflage. This increased militarization led to a wave of criticism from both sides of the aisle, and in response, the federal government launched an investigation that ultimately resulted in Executive Order 13688. This executive order sought to regulate the 1033 program, barring law enforcement agencies from acquiring certain equipment and restricting them from acquiring others, while also increasing transparency regarding the procurement of material. Whereas some felt that these restrictions would handicap police departments, others felt that it was an appropriate response to the escalating militarization of law enforcement agencies. At the center of this debate over police militarization lies a fairly simple question. Does an increase in militarization lead to a corresponding increase in the lethality of law enforcement agencies? Myself, Jack Mewhirter, Ryan Welch, and Jason Wilks sought to answer this question by carrying out the first quantitative study of the effects of militarization on police shootings. First, some clarifications. Borrowing from Peter Kraska's 2007 piece on police militarization, we define militarization as the embrace and implementation of an ideology that stresses the use of force as the appropriate and efficacious means to solve problems. Kraska provides 4 dimensions of militarization: material, cultural, organizational, and operational. We contend that these dimensions reinforce one another so that an increase in one can lead to an increase in the others. As materials are obtained through the 1033 program, martial language, martial arrangements such as elite units, and willingness to engage in high-risk situations also increase. Second, and this is important, we take no stance as to whether lethal police shootings are justified or not. Instead, we simply seek to investigate the linkage between militarization and the increased lethality by law enforcement agencies. Given that not every law enforcement agency received the same amount of dispersals from the 1033 program, variation in 1033 disbursements allowed us to test the proposition that, all things equal, the receipt of higher levels of 1033 equipment can lead to increased levels of violence from law enforcement agencies. Data on police shootings is notoriously unreliable. As such, we utilize data from D. Brian Berghart's Fatal Encounters database, which draws from numerous sources to provide the most comprehensive existing list of police shootings during the time period for which we have data on 1033 transfers. Despite the efforts of Mr. Berghart, this county-level data is limited to the states of New Hampshire, Maine, Connecticut, and Nevada. Using this data, and controlling for factors such as median household income, black population, violent crime, and civilian drug use, we estimated a series of regressions meant to test the effect of 1033 transfers on 3 dependent variables meant to capture the scale of police violence: the number of civilian casualties, the change in the number of civilian casualties, and the number of dogs killed by police. We find a positive and statistically significant relationship between 1033 transfers and police violence in all of our models. Substantively, we find that movement from the minimum to the maximum level of 1033 transfers raises expected civilian killings by roughly 129% in a given county in a given year. While we believe that this provides the most direct test of our hypothesis, empirically establishing a relationship between killings and military transfers presents a challenge given the potential for endogeneity. Specifically, If law enforcement agencies correctly anticipate future conflict with civilians and thus seek more 1033 transfers, our estimates could be systematically biased. To account for this, we utilize an alternative dependent variable that should be independent of any law enforcement agency's propensity to request and receive transfers, which is the number of dogs killed by police in a given county for each included year. Likewise, we find that police receiving the highest numbers of 1033 transfers kill dogs at a rate which is an order of magnitude higher than those with no transfers, which strengthens our confidence in our claim about the effects of police militarization. Without more comprehensive and representative data of police shootings across the nation, our analysis is relatively preliminary. Despite this, we consider our work to be the best existing attempt to establish the proposed relationship between military transfers and police violence. We hope that our research will add to the overall conversation regarding policing in the United States, as well as abroad. Thank you for watching. More details are available in the full paper, and we would love to hear your comments.